My name is Alan Briggs. I'm 44 years old, and until recently, I was a senior technical officer in the United States Army. I served for 2 decades, most of it buried in a desert base that barely made the maps but somehow kept half the country's remote defense grid running. My official title was Systems Logistics Supervisor, but that never really covered it. I wasn't the guy pushing papers or giving PowerPoints. I was the guy crawling under dead servers at 3 in the morning, writing emergency firmware patches while everyone else was sleeping. If something blinked red on base, I was the one who knew which wire to jiggle, which legacy panel needed a kick, or which contractor forgot to update the code. Some people had teams. I had a pair of pliers, a coffee thermos, and a brain full of dirty system maps nobody else could follow. I was the last guy you wanted to call, because if I was involved, things were already going sideways. But I always showed up, even when it wasn't my shift. Especially then. The thing is, in the military, you learn early on that, if you're too good at fixing problems, they stop seeing you as a person. You become part of the system, invisible unless it breaks. That was me, ghost in the machine, holding the place together, with duct tape logic and no formal recognition. Then one day, after 20 years of that, I walked off base with a single duffel bag and a sheet of paper thanking me for my service. I didn't even get a ceremony. Hell, the CO didn't shake my hand. I think he was out golfing that week. It's been a few months since then. Long enough for the bruises to stop showing, but not long enough for the sting to fade. I never planned on telling this story. Not really. But something happened not long after I left that changed everything. And I mean everything. So if you've ever been the one behind the scenes, the one no one thanks but everyone depends on, this one's for you. Because what came next? Let's just say the system finally noticed I was missing, and they did not like what they found. It came in as an email, not a phone call, not a face-to-face sit-down like you'd expect after 20 years of service. Just a line of cold text buried in my inbox at 5:47 a.m. Subject line, contract status update. I read it 3 times before it sank in. My civilian position had been marked as non-essential, effective immediately. No thank you for your service. No handshake. No one even had the decency to call. I wasn't even on base when it hit. I'd taken a rare weekend off to visit my sister in Phoenix. When I came back Monday morning, my badge wouldn't scan at the gate. Thought it was a system glitch at first. Turns out, the system was working just fine. It just didn't want me anymore. The guard at the checkpoint looked confused. Said my clearance had been revoked. I asked if he could call the CO. He said the CO wasn't on site. I asked for the XO. No dice. He handed me a number to call HR in DC. I stood there in the rising heat, boots planted in the desert dust, like a damn ghost. Like I never existed. So that was it, 20 years. Gone in one email. I had to turn around, drive 3 hours back home without a uniform, without a job, and without a clue what the hell just happened. They didn't even give me time to clear my locker. The only reason I got my stuff back was because Staff Sergeant Davis, God bless him, snuck it out in a storage bin and left it on my porch 3 days later. Nobody else called. Nobody said goodbye. The radio silence from my old crew hurt more than the email. Guys I trained. Systems I built. Night shifts I pulled when they were home with their families. I was the guy who stayed when the backups failed and the servers blinked red. But once I was gone, it was like I'd never been there at all. I kept checking my phone that week, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something. But all I got were a couple LinkedIn requests from strangers and a survey from base HR asking about my offboarding experience. I didn't answer it. I didn't trust myself not to throw the phone across the damn room. See, the part they don't tell you when you sign up is that loyalty isn't mutual. You give them your best years, your weekends, your knees, your marriage, and when they're done with you, they don't even look you in the eye. They just cut the cord and pretend it never existed. I wasn't angry at first. I was stunned. Like someone had cut the wires in my chest and I hadn't noticed until I tried to breathe. I kept going through the motions like I was still on duty, Wake up at 0500, coffee, PT. Systems check. But there were no systems. No uniform. No base to drive to. Just an empty garage and a box of gear they didn't even bother to reclaim. After a few days, the anger came. Quiet at first, like a hum behind my eyes. Then it built. Every time I thought about the badge not scanning. Every time I remembered how nobody stood up for me. Not even the CO I'd bailed out during the generator meltdown in 2016. I rewired half the base by flashlight while he sat in a tent giving press updates. Guess that didn't make it to my record. I gave everything to that place. I wasn't just maintaining their systems. I was holding them together with scraps and spit, and they knew it. Deep down, they knew, but when it was time to cut someone, they didn't hesitate. Didn't care that I'd been the one they always called when things went south. You start to wonder if you mattered at all. If any of it meant anything. The late nights, the busted knuckles, the missed birthdays. It all starts to blur when the only goodbye you get is a line of text. I didn't deserve a medal. But damn, I thought I at least earned a voice on the other end of the line. Instead, all I got was silence. And that silence said everything. 6 hours later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I was on the back porch, drinking a cold beer and staring into the empty stretch of desert behind my house, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. The sun had just dipped below the ridge when the first call came in. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then another. Then 5 more, one right after the other. By the time I picked it up, I had 16 missed calls, half of them from numbers I recognized from base. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or throw the thing in the dirt. The same people who hadn't said a damn word when I left were suddenly desperate to reach me. That's when I saw it. Colonel Graham, the CO himself. He hadn't spoken to me in months. Not even during my offboarding. Now his name was flashing like a warning light on the screen. I answered without saying a word. His voice was tight. Panicked. Systems down. Briggs. Total failure. They brought in a replacement contractor who pushed an update through without understanding the infrastructure. Everything collapsed. Cooling, comms, even external surveillance links. The ops center had no visual on outer perimeter. Protocols weren't syncing. Backup scripts were corrupted. Emergency generators weren't triggering because the logic tables had been overwritten. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. All that silence they gave me, now they were choking on it. Then he said the part I'll never forget. We need you. You're the only one who knows how it all fits together. You built the bridge between 3 generations of tech. Nobody else has the map. I felt something hot rise in my chest. Not pride. Not exactly. It was more like justice. Not revenge. Not yet. But the kind of satisfaction you get when the world accidentally tells you the truth. They tried to cut me out. Now the whole base was crumbling because I wasn't there to hold it up. I leaned back in the chair and looked up at the sky. My knuckles were still raw from where I'd punched the wall earlier that week. Felt like that pain had been waiting for a moment like this. I could hear him breathing on the other end, waiting, hoping. That's the thing. They didn't just need a body to come fix things. They needed the mind that had been quietly saving their asses for years while they took credit for stability I created. And now, with systems in free fall and contractors shrugging at error logs, they finally realized who'd been keeping the lights on. I told him I'd think about it, told him to send me a full diagnostics report and a list of failed protocols. His voice cracked when he said they didn't have one. Said the reporting software was part of what went down. I smiled. Not because it felt good to see them suffer, but because it meant they finally understood what they'd thrown away. Before I hung up, he said it again. Alan, we need you. Not a contractor. Not a temp. You. I ended the call and stared at the desert for a long time. The quiet out there felt different now. Not empty, but heavy. Like something was shifting. Like for the first time, the silence was on my terms. I walked back into that base 3 days later. Not in uniform, not with a badge. This time I had a contract in my pocket and my name on the header. Independent Systems Consultant. Terms negotiated. Rate 4 times what I used to make. They paid up front. At the gate, the same guard who once told me my clearance was revoked now stood a little straighter. He looked confused when he saw me, then nodded without a word. I scanned in with a temporary badge labeled Visitor, Level 3 clearance. But everyone on that base knew I wasn't just a visitor. The sun was brutal that morning. I parked in the staff lot, stepped out of my truck, and slung my tool bag over my shoulder like it weighed nothing. I was dressed in jeans, boots, and a dark gray polo with no logo, no insignia, no rank. Just the man they called when things were too broken for anyone else. The walk to Central Command felt different. Every turn, every hallway that used to feel like routine now felt like reclaimed ground. Like I wasn't walking back into their system, I was walking into mine. People passed me slower. Their eyes followed me longer. I caught a few whispering. One lieutenant nodded and stepped aside like I outranked him. I didn't correct him. When I reached the server bay, 2 junior techs were arguing over a wiring diagram. They froze when they saw me. I didn't say a word, just looked over their shoulders and pointed at the mislabel. Left them red-faced and scrambling. I kept walking. Inside the command room, it was chaos. Alarms still blinking, screens frozen. A full team was hunched over terminals, trying to force communication between legacy systems and modern platforms that were never designed to play nice. I spotted Graham by the far wall. He saw me and immediately started weaving through the crowd like a man reaching for a lifeline. He shook my hand harder than he ever had when I worked for him. His voice had lost its usual bark. It was closer to relief, or maybe desperation. I let him talk for a minute, let him lay out just how deep they were in it. Then I stopped him mid-sentence and asked where the backup drives were stored. His face went blank. That's when I knew they had no plan. I got to work without waiting, pulled out my tablet, opened the encrypted diagnostic software I'd built at home in my spare time. The interface lit up instantly when I patched into the line. Within 10 minutes, I had a rough map of the failure cascade. The root node was buried 3 layers down in a legacy script no one had touched in years, except me. I stood up and turned to the room. Every technician, every officer, even the colonel went quiet. They were watching me like I was performing surgery. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just started issuing instructions. You, reroute power from segment B through the isolated bypass. You, isolate node 7 and prepare a soft restart. You, pull every firmware file with a 2015 timestamp and dump it to drive. Nobody questioned me. Not this time. They moved fast, precise. I'd earned that the hard way over 2 decades. But today was different. Today I wasn't operating in their chain of command. I was leading from outside of it. And the silence in that room wasn't disrespect. It was recognition. By noon, we had critical systems back online. Cooling was stable, comms were functional, surveillance feeds started trickling back in. Operators breathed easier. The command center exhaled like a balloon they forgot they were holding. Graham clapped me on the back like we were old friends. I let him. But I didn't forget. I didn't forget the day my badge stopped working. The silence from people now pretending they always had my back. I hadn't come back for loyalty. I came back for clarity. To show them what they lost. And to make damn sure they never thought they could do it without me again. That day, I didn't eat in the mess. I brought my own lunch. Ate alone in the courtyard, watching the sun hang heavy over the sand. A few enlisted men walked by and nodded. I nodded back. They knew, you can't fake respect. You can't demand it either. You earn it, one fire at a time. And I'd walked through more fires than they'd ever know. This time, they didn't just see a technician. They saw a man who built the bones of their operation and came back from the ashes with the contract in his hands. I wasn't just fixing systems. I was reclaiming my name. And every quiet stare, every awkward salute, every folder handed to me without question, it told me I'd done exactly that. It started with 1 beer and a conversation I didn't plan to have. I met up with Jake Sullivan, an old tech sergeant I hadn't seen since our deployment in Kandahar. We sat at this dim little bar just outside town, the kind of place where the floor creaks and the bartender remembers your name after 2 visits. I was nursing a bottle, still half in my head about the base mess, when Jake leaned in and asked what I was going to do next. I gave the usual line about taking time off, maybe consulting if something came up. He just looked at me, then said one sentence that stuck. "You ever think maybe it's time you ran the show?" I laughed, but it wasn't a joke. It hit a nerve I didn't realize was raw. I'd spent 2 decades making things work for people who barely knew what I did. And when the machine didn't need me anymore, they tossed me like a worn-out fuse. We sat there for another hour, going back and forth. Jake had his own horror stories. Burned out by a contractor job, where they squeezed every ounce out of him, then blamed him when things broke. We started sketching on napkins, talking systems, contracts, possibilities. It wasn't a business plan. Not yet. It was frustration given direction. By the time we hit our second round, I said it out loud. "I'm starting something." Jake leaned back, grinned, and nodded like he'd been waiting for me to catch up. We called it Hartley Tactical, a nod to my mother's family name. Sounded strong, professional, something you could print on a van and not be embarrassed by. That night, I drove home with more fire in my gut than I'd felt in years. I wasn't just walking away from the past. I was building something new from the ground up. Something no one could take from me with a cold email and a dead badge. The next morning, I registered the name, bought the domain, and opened a business account. I didn't have clients yet, didn't have a team, but I had a mission, and that was enough to start. No more waiting around to be picked. No more fixing things just to be forgotten. I was done being a part someone else replaced. I was going to be the system they couldn't run without. Hartley Tactical was born in a bar booth over 1 beer and 2 decades of being overlooked. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was mine. And from that moment on, I made one promise to myself. No one ever gets to decide my worth again. The email came in on a Tuesday morning. Subject line was just my name, all caps. I knew before I opened it that something had shifted. It was from the same base that cut me loose. Not a technician this time, not even the colonel. It was from the director of systems command. Straight from the top. They were offering me a full-time CTO role, high salary, benefits, stock options if I signed on for a 5-year rebuild plan. I read it twice. Then again. I wasn't angry. I didn't feel vindicated either. It was something quieter than that. Like the sound of a heavy door closing behind you. Not slamming, just sealing shut. I leaned back in my chair, sipping coffee while the sun warmed the edge of my desk. The same desk where I'd just reviewed 3 new contracts for Hartley Tactical. 2 were renewals. One was a new factory project out west, an 8-month job that came with full autonomy and a 6-figure payout. For a second, I thought about how different this moment would have felt a year ago. Back then, I would have jumped at this offer, thought it was salvation, a chance to prove myself again. But now, it just felt like an echo from a version of me I'd already buried. I picked up the phone, called the number in the email. The line clicked, and a voice I half recognized came on. He launched into the pitch, full of apologies and future talk. I listened, let him say his piece. Then I told him thanks. Truly. I said, I appreciated the offer. I even said I understood it, but I had to pass. There was a pause on the other end. He asked if it was about money. I told him it wasn't. It was about control. It was about the right to decide when I work, how I work, and who I work with. And most of all, it was about not forgetting what it felt like to be erased. To be left in silence by people who only saw your value when their system started to break. He tried to push once more. Said I'd have real power now. That I could lead something meaningful. I smiled. Not out of smugness. Just because I knew something he didn't. I already was. I told him Hartley Tactical wasn't just surviving. We were growing. And the freedom I'd found building this company was worth more than any title or corner office. I wished him luck. Meant it. Then I hung up. There was no dramatic music. No fist pump or mic drop. Just a quiet, satisfied kind of peace. I looked out the window, watched the light stretch across the floor, and got back to work. The morning sun hit the glass just right. I stood at the top floor of our new headquarters, hands in my pockets, watching the crew unload fresh hardware for a new project in Texas. It was quiet up there, just me, the view, and the weight of everything we'd built. A year ago, they cut me out with a line in an email. No handshake, no thanks, just silence. Now, that silence had been replaced with voices, real ones, people who believed in what we were doing, who called me boss, but worked beside me, not beneath me. The office buzzed below, techs, coordinators, even our junior devs. They moved with purpose, like they knew this place mattered. I didn't need a sign on the door to remind me. I could feel it in the floor, in the walls, in every update pinging across my inbox. There was no bitterness left in me. That got burned out months ago. What I felt now was clarity. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not to them, not even to myself. I had built something lasting, something real. The same base that pushed me out still sent emails. They stayed on the client list, they still got their updates, their systems maintained, but they didn't get me. Not really. That part of the story was closed. When I handed off their last report to my ops lead, I didn't even look at the summary. Didn't need to. I trusted my team. Trusted that what I had passed on would be protected. That's what leadership was supposed to be. Not orders barked down a hallway. Just quiet strength and steady hands. I wasn't angry they tried to bring me back. I understood it. They saw a fire they couldn't control and tried to drag me into it again. But I didn't step in. I drew the line, and for once I didn't cross it. That's the thing no one teaches you when you leave service. The hardest fight isn't on a battlefield. It's figuring out who you are when no one's giving orders. When you have to choose what kind of man you want to be. I chose to build. I chose to lead without bending. To forgive but not forget. And now, standing there with a full crew below and a full book of business ahead, I knew one thing for sure. They didn't own me anymore. No one did. And that freedom, that quiet, unshakable truth, was more powerful than any rank I ever held.